Hello, happy June. So exciting. I am traveling beginning tomorrow. And so I was contemplating what I was going to do, if I was going to try and go live, if I was going to record, what was I going to do? And I decided that I was going to record and hope for the best for it uploading. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Um, and then I was thinking about what should the topic be as we head into the summer months. It is June 3rd. And what should the topic be? And then it hit me. This time of year, there are lots of things that happen around reading and new movie releases and summer school, summer extension learning classes for those who teach. And so I got to thinking about knowledge, learning. How do we take things from our head to our heart and then make a habit of it? So that is today's podcast. So I begin with a question. Have you ever read a book, attended a workshop, or listened to a podcast and thought, that was exactly what I needed to, and then fill in, read, learn, hear, or so on. That was exactly what I needed to hear. And then 6 months later, you realize that nothing in your life has actually changed. Did you know you're alone? You're not alone. So many of us sign up for that class, do this thing, try that thing, and miss a very key step, which is the integration. We live in a world overflowing with information. We learn almost anything with a few clicks. With the invention of the internet and with Zoom being a thing, and with the explosion of information that happened during the pandemic in 2020 and so on, that many of us are carrying around shelves full of knowledge that have never been fully integrated into our lives. Today's topic explores the difference between knowledge, learning, and integration, and why transformation happens only when all three work together. So let's begin with knowledge. Knowledge is information, right? Knowledge is what we know, facts, concepts, ideas, principles. Knowledge is important because it expands awareness. Without knowledge, we often don't know that there is another possibility. It's that aha moment when we hear something new, right? So there's a number of things we could learn about, right? We could learn, and these are buzzwords or topics that are out there in the world right now. Learning about healthy boundaries, learning about leadership, understanding communication skills, discovering creativity's role in well-being. So when we take the knowledge in, it gives us language. We now have words to help us identify things, concepts, ideas that we've only heard about. If we learn more about them, we can speak about them, right? It helps us identify what we may have been experienced but couldn't yet name. So each segment today, I'm going to ask you a question. And if you are a journaler, you might consider journaling these. And if you're not ready to do that now, want to come back later and listen again and do it then, go right ahead. So the first question under knowledge, the thing that helps us identify what we may have experienced but couldn't quite name, is what is something you know today that your younger self did not know? What is something you know today that your younger self did not know? The next bit, so there's knowledge, right? But learning is an experience. Learning happens when the information that we put in our head meets experience. It requires engagement. I think about this with regard to theater, since that is a large portion of the world that I live in. And I do take on new clients that want to learn how to act on stage, want to be better public speakers, want to be self advocates, want to shift from theater to film. That requires an engagement of this knowledge we have up here with the body. It is the testing of ideas in real life. It's experimentation. So some of the things that you can do to have this experiential thing and taking the knowledge to learning for ourselves is to read with confidence. Read about confidence. Study public speaking. Join a Toastmasters group. Watch videos on creativity and then try some of the things that are in that. That's when the real learning occurs, is when you step onto stage, when you share your story, when you have a difficult conversation, when you create something imperfect and let others see it. So the learning part requires some vulnerability. Knowledge is taking in what other people have learned. And learning is you experimenting and trying it on and playing with it, allowing for mistakes to happen, for you to experiment and figure out which way that knowledge can be used by you. So I have, on a personal note, been many different things in my life. I was an actor. I was a human resources director, primarily responsible for training and development. I created new training programs. I integrated leadership into the training. I then went and helped people create businesses, retail businesses. And then I was involved in tourism. And then I was involved in the cruise industry. And then I became a coach. As I looked at all of those things that I have done in my life, I realized that a lot of the knowledge that I had was from my theater background. It was on sharing story. It was on sharing who we really were. In the clients that I coach, that is one of the things that we dig into, is who are you really? At the core essence of your being, what is it that you want? And that, if you've ever directed a show or been an actor, you know that that's the motivation behind. When I was a freshman in high school, I had an English teacher that gave us our very first creative writing assignment. We were to pick something that was from our life and write about that and put as much description and emotion and us in that story as possible. The summer before this writing experience, I had to make the decision to put my beloved dog to sleep. He had cancer and was blind and was old, and his quality of life was not good. And so I chose to write about my dog, my beloved dog, my my sibling with fur. Actually, poodles have hair, so my sibling with hair. And I received that paper back, and it had a great big bold F on it. Now, mind you, before we got the papers back with the grades on them, we had to actually stand up in front of the class and share the stories. And there were many that came up to me and said, "Thank you for sharing. I've been there. I know what that is." So they were touched by the vulnerableness of that story. That F stuck with me for a long time. So, freshman in high school, is that 15? And when I was 61, no, 60, when I was 60, so 45 years later, I was given the opportunity to do a free writing retreat for 4 days. I had no idea what was going to happen, but I know that I had struggled with writing for my entire life. And anytime I needed to do something that was an important paper, whether it was a position paper or it was something for my graduate degree, I always had my husband read it and give me feedback because I was deathly afraid of getting an F. Well, what materialized during that free writing experience was my memoir, which contained things like getting an F. It contained things like being told I was tone deaf. It basically exposed some of my weakest parts, but how owning those weakest parts made me more real as a person and helped me discover myself. In the writing of that memoir and the editing of that memoir, and now while it sits out of my hands in the final proofing and editing stage, to be released later this year, to have more people read it, I realize that while I have learned a lot about writing, about creating a page-turning book, it wasn't until I began to put mine together and experience the building of it that it was then that I learned that I am a writer. I have writing knowledge, but my experience has created a writer out of me. And then becomes the integration into transformation. Integration becomes when that learning becomes a part of who you are. And that is my memoir. That is every time I direct a show and I teach people. That is when my husband and I work with couples. That is when I teach someone else something, but ask them along the way, how can this become a part of who you are? Integration is when it no longer becomes something that we do, but it becomes how we live. Oh. I think about when I began the learning, the knowledge building of what it means to be a coach and learning about healthy boundaries and putting little questions in my head about what I was doing and if I was projecting, was I making it my own, or was I listening from a space of neutrality? And then practicing that with other coaches, and then finally doing it with clients and realizing that healthy boundaries when it comes to keeping myself separate from their stuff is now natural. I think about the writing of my book, and at first I was choosing to be intentionally courageous in the writing and storytelling, but now it has become a part of my identity in that my memoir's title is Courageous, a journey from pain to purpose. I also think about this whole idea behind theater versus film. Film, you have the opportunity to film it again and again and again and again and again until we get it to be just the way the director wants it. But as actors on stage, you rehearse and 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 you rehearse, and it feels like 100 times. And you're not rehearsing because you don't know the lines, but because repetition becomes the performance and it becomes embodied. Life works the same way. Integration is rehearsal becoming instinct. That is why when we go to give a speech or a public address or write an article or interview for something, we practice and practice and practice and practice and reflect and pause and journal and practice and reflect and pause and journal and practice. We are embodying what it is that we want to communicate. That last step is probably the one that trips most people up. They're great at learning about knowledge, and they're okay at doing some action behind it to make it a part of them. But where they sometimes misstep is not rehearse enough to have it become fully embodied in who they are. It's a lot of energy behind that for me. I'm very passionate about it because of the work that I do. Meditation is not a one and done. Meditation is a practice. Mindfulness is not a one and done. It is a practice. Being a human that is present in today's day and age with all the things going on around us, comes with practice of embodiment of presence. Otherwise, we become human beings doing without thinking, and it becomes habit that we have learned that we don't always feel good about. So there are 4 signs that I have come to realize when you can see that your knowledge is stuck without integration. One is probably the one I see the most, and that is you keep consuming but rarely applying. This can be in many forms. You know, January of 2020 was an interesting time. I happened upon a woman on my Facebook feed, of all things, and she was talking about visibility and that she was doing a boot camp to help us become more visible. And I thought, yeah, I always say I want to do this, that, or another thing, but I never actually put it into place. So let's try this out. So I signed up for this boot camp. And what I learned is that I was great at learning, and that this class was going to force me to integrate. I couldn't just read a book, and I couldn't listen to a podcast, and I couldn't just follow along on the paper. I had to actually take action steps. So if you find yourself constantly reading and listening to podcasts and taking new courses, and you're taking it in and you're taking it in and you're taking it in, and you're not allowing yourself some space to implement, you are stuck in obtaining knowledge. A second one is, and I can say that there was a time in my life where this one fit me. You can teach it, but you don't practice it. Sometimes we become experts in concepts, but we've never fully embodied them. They haven't become a part of our beingness. The third one is you wait until you feel ready. Integration happens through imperfect action, not perfect readiness, because there will never be the perfect time. I have learned that so much. And I learn that every time I direct a play. Each and every actor, each and every producer, each and every director would like to have another week. If we had one more week, we'd be ready. If we had one more, the thing is, it is ready when it is ready. It is ready when that curtain opens or goes up. And it will be the best that it can be in that moment. You cannot wait until you are ready, because ready will not happen. Take imperfect action, make mistakes, pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and do. The fourth one is probably the one we push aside the most. You know what needs to change, but you continue in the same patterns. You know what needs to change, but you continue in the same patterns. While awareness is valuable, awareness alone does not create transformation. You have to take action. You know, there's an old acronym of fear: false evidence appearing real. Fear comes up and we look at it as something that we should be afraid of. It is our ego, our super ego, getting in the way, telling us this doesn't feel safe, this doesn't feel right, you're not ready, you're going to make a mistake, people are going to lack it, you're not good enough, blah, 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 blah. However, fear is false evidence appearing real, because what your mind is telling you, you don't know if that's going to happen. Take the giant leap through the comfort zone and see what comes out on the other side. So as I was sitting with this and I was thinking, you know, I've spent a year on an executive board for an international nonprofit here in Washington State. And the learning curve for me this year was, I'm going to say, was like this, because it was a role I was familiar with. That's why I was given it when I was put on this board a year ago. And there were some questions that I had, but there were not a lot of questions. And I didn't have to necessarily do the heavy lifting. I had a partner that did the heavy lifting. This coming weekend, I am going to be up-leveled on that executive board to a role that, while I've done bits and pieces of it, this one is on steroids. It is the bits and pieces I've done on steroids. So I was thinking about, how can I move towards integration with this new role that I have to take? I have the knowledge. I've read the things. I have reviewed the things. But now I have to take action. So I got to thinking, what are some steps that I can take to move me towards integration in this new role? And I went back to when I was in college and I was learning about directing and light designing and set designing and costume designing and producing and taking apart a show and, you know, creating a vision for it. And I saw 5 steps to move towards integration. And while they don't all have to be present, I think one or two of them present to help with integration is good. So the first one was to choose one insight. What is the most important thing I need to practice, do, or try right now? Not 10, just one. What is the most important thing I need to practice right now? The second way to move towards integration is to start small. Tiny, consistent actions outperform grand declarations. Tiny, consistent actions outperform grand declarations. The third one I do a lot, and that's reflect regularly. Ask yourself what worked, what didn't, what am I learning? What could I do differently next time? What if I tried? Reflect regularly, ask yourself those questions and write about it if you're a writer, or do a voice memo to hear yourself. The fourth one is to practice, rehearse before you master. Mastery comes after repetition, not before. I have learned that the hard way. I also think back to when I was probably 10, when I got my first bike. And you get that first bike, and your dad or your mom or whomever helps you, and then they let go and you fall. And you're like, oh, can you hold on a little bit longer? And then you do it and they let go again, and you fall again, and so on and so forth, until finally, when they let go, you've got it. In fact, you go, I've got it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I used to teach swim lessons for really little kids, and I saw that happen then. And then I used to do masters. I used to teach people how to swim better so that they could do triathlons. And I saw that and heard that then. But that repetition is where mastery comes, not before. And it's that way for everything, which means you have to do the fifth one, which is to give yourself time. Integration is slower than we want. We want it to be yesterday. We want it to be before we started. But it takes time because it takes practice, and it takes small, consistent actions. And it takes reflection. So those 5 ways to move towards integration, again, are to choose one insight. What is the most important thing I need to practice right now? 2, start small. Tiny, consistent actions outperform grand declarations. Reflect regularly. What worked? What didn't? What am I learning? Practice before you master. Mastery comes after repetition. And the third one is, or fifth one is, give yourself time. Integration is often much slower than we want. Growth resembles gardening more than construction. Plant a seed under the earth. You feed that seed, you give it water, you make sure it has light, and then it starts to sprout. And then it keeps growing. Seeds, gardens, and us. We need seasons of growth and time. So why does that even matter? Why does integration matter? So we've got knowledge. We are on the road to learning. And we are integrating, or at least we are trying to integrate. So why does integration matter in this whole thing? This one I sat with for a little bit. Why does it matter? The world doesn't need more people collecting information. In fact, we have the internet that's collecting information. And depending on your perspective, we also have the engines of AI collecting information. The world, though, needs people living what they know. I think the most impactful leaders aren't necessarily those who know the most, but those who are consistently embodying what they've learned to create the impact that they need to create to change the world. I think there is this woman, if you are on Facebook, find her, or Instagram. Her name is Kelsey, and you will find her by typing in row with Kelsey. She is rowing from the coast of California to Hawaii to raise money for the Whale Foundation. And the Whale Foundation is not the whales that swim in the water. It is an organization that supports seasonal tour guides who don't have access to many of the things that you and I do: healthcare, mental health care. And there's a whole story on the whalefoundation.org website. Go read it. This is a person who is an Olympic rower. She is a guide in the Grand Canyon and has been for many years. She has collected a lot of information and knowledge. And I believe that she is an impactful leader because she is embodying what she has learned. She is rowing across the Pacific Ocean to Hawaii to raise awareness and money for an institution that can help save lives. She's not just standing there giving you statistics about why she's doing this, but it is her story that is. She has embodied what needs to be shared. You know, this is true for artists, for parents, for coaches of sports teams or individuals, community builders. It is true for all of us. Integration. So, how do we take knowledge, go from our head to our heart, and then create habits that create change? So, in closing today, I have 3 questions for you. What knowledge has been most meaningful in your life recently? What are you actively learning through experience? And what lesson is asking to be integrated more deeply into your life right now? So again, those questions that I would like you to consider. What knowledge has been the most meaningful in your life recently? What are you actively learning through experience? And what lesson is asking to be integrated more deeply into your life right now? I am hoping that you will see that the next step isn't about finding another book, podcast, or course, but the next step is practicing what you already know, because knowledge may be the door that you are about to open, but learning invites us to walk through it, and integration is what allows us to truly live on the other side of the door. If today's topic resonates with you, I would love to hear about it. Perhaps post either here or send me an email, or go to social media and post it under either my Instagram, Coach Cyndi, or my Facebook page. What is one insight that you're committed to integrating in your life this week? I do love to hear from you. And if you're navigating a season of transition or rediscovering a voice within, I invite you to download my free journal for healing and hope. And I also have another journal on there, the 5 ways to live more creatively, which sometimes sparks things about integration. Either one. And I will see you next week and hope you are healthy and well. And thank you for being here.